The humid southern air hung heavy, even in the fading light of dusk. Anna stood on the porch of her trailer home, watching her son Ethan chase fireflies across the overgrown yard. The sweet scent of honeysuckle mingled with the less-than-pleasant aroma of Harold's cheap beer, drifting across from the trailer next door. It was a familiar scent, usually accompanied by the sounds of Harold and Edna's volatile marriage. "Edna, where in the hell are ya? Get in here." Harold's voice, thick with drunken annoyance, boomed through the stillness. Anna winced, pulling Ethan closer as Edna's sharp retort cut through the quiet. "Lord Harold, hush up, I'm right here feeding the chickens. You deaf or something? Don't you sass me, woman. You should be inside with your husband where you belong. Now move it." Harold's voice grew closer, laced with a menacing growl. Anna quickly ushered Ethan inside, hoping the flimsy walls of their trailer home would muffle the sounds of the impending fight. She'd seen this countless times before. Harold, fueled by cheap beer and a lifetime of unchecked entitlement, would terrorize poor Edna until she'd either retreat into stony silence or flee to her sister's place across the county. A couple of evenings later, the shouting started again, even louder this time. Ethan, thankfully, was already asleep, his small chest rising and falling peacefully in his bed. Anna, however, wasn't afforded that luxury. He sat at the kitchen table, a mug of lukewarm coffee in her hand, trying to drown out the sound of Harold's voice. "I told you, Harold, I'm too old for this. Act your age, why don't you? People can hear you carrying on like a rutting dog." Edna's voice shook with a mixture of exhaustion and anger. "What's it to them? A wife's gotta take care of her husband. Ain't natural for a woman to refuse her man, unless—" Harold's voice dripped with drunken suspicion. "Unless you got your eyes on someone else, is that it?" Anna cringed, imagining Edna's face, etched with years of weary resignation. "Don't be stupid. Just look at me, I'm old, Harold. I ain't got the energy for any of that, not with you, not with anyone. Now leave me be." A door slammed, followed by the unmistakable creak of the bed in the next trailer. Anna shuddered, a wave of pity for Edna washing over her. She knew that Edna endured it all because she had nowhere else to go, no other family to turn to. Suddenly, Anna felt a chill, as if a cold draft had swept through the room, settling at the base of her spine. There was a darkness to Harold's need, desperation that set her teeth on edge. She couldn't quite explain it, but she knew with a certainty that settled heavy in her gut that Edna wasn't the only woman Harold was watching. The thin walls of Anna's own trailer home did little to muffle the sounds of Harold and Edna's latest brawl. Ethan, oblivious to the tension, played with a battered toy truck on the floor at her feet. Flickering light from the television cast long shadows across the room, adding to the unsettling atmosphere. It had been 5 years since Mark, her husband and Ethan's father, had died suddenly from a heart attack. She was only 23 then, left to navigate a world of grief and responsibility, with a newborn baby and a heart full of shattered dreams. Her own mother, already frail, had passed away barely a year later, leaving Anna truly alone in the world. She found a degree of solace in the hard work of survival, waitressing double shifts, scrubbing floors, taking in laundry, anything to make ends meet. The kindness of neighbors, bringing over casseroles and babysitting Ethan while Anna worked, had been a lifeline. Even Harold, in those early days, had offered a gruff sort of sympathy, fixing a broken step, helping her navigate the confusing world of government assistance. Back then, his interest in her had seemed almost paternal, tinged with pity more than anything else. But as the years passed and Anna rebuilt her life, finding a sense of purpose in providing for Ethan, she noticed a shift in Harold's demeanor. His gaze lingered a little too long on her body. His compliments became increasingly inappropriate, his presence a source of unease rather than comfort. Anna began to dread running into him at the mailbox, avoiding eye contact, her hand always hovering near the can of pepper spray she carried in her purse. She yearned for a life free from worry, a safe haven for her and Ethan, a place where Harold's shadow wouldn't reach them. A sudden gust of wind rattled the flimsy windows of the trailer home, pulling Anna back to the present. A storm was brewing, dark clouds rolling in fast. First fat raindrops were already splattering against the dusty ground. Anna rushed outside to gather the laundry she had hung out to dry earlier. Damn it, she muttered, her clothes already soaked through. She scanned the yard, noticing a pile of neatly folded laundry under the awning of Harold's trailer home. Anna hesitated, debating whether to brave an encounter with him to retrieve her things. But the wind was picking up and the rain was coming down harder now. She pushed open the door to her trailer, but her laundry was nowhere to be found inside. The wind must have blown it into the woods behind their homes, she thought, a familiar ache of frustration tightening in her chest. It was already running late to pick up Ethan from Aunt Susan. Just as Anna was about to resign herself to the fact that her laundry had been claimed by the wind and the woods, she heard Harold's voice booming from his porch. "Anna? Anna, your things are here at my place." Anna stepped back out onto the porch, her eyebrows shooting up in surprise. Harold was standing on his porch, waving her over. He was holding a basket overflowing with her freshly laundered clothes. "Oh, thank you, Harold. I couldn't imagine where they'd gone." Anna called back, hesitant but grateful. "Think nothing of it, sweetheart. Neighbors help each other out, right?" Harold grinned, his eyes sweeping over her rain-dampened shirt. The endearment, especially in front of Edna, sent a chill down Anna's spine. "Right, well, I'll come get them as soon as the rain lets up. I have to run and get Ethan," Anna said quickly, eager to escape the intensity of his gaze. "Take your time, darlin', no hurry." Anna hurried back inside, closing the door firmly behind her. She paced the small space, a knot of anxiety forming in her stomach. Edna always kept a watchful eye on Harold, especially when it came to Anna. There were times, though, when Edna would disappear for days, holing up at her sister's place across the county, seeking refuge from Harold's drunken advances and volatile temper. Anna suspected Edna knew about Harold's wandering eyes, knew the kind of man he was under the guise of good old boy charm. By the time the rain subsided, Anna rushed over to Harold's trailer home, arms wrapped around herself against the sudden chill. She knocked briskly on the door. "Edna? Harold? I'm here for my things." Silence. Anna knocked again, louder this time. She could hear the faint drone of the television inside. The door swung open, revealing Harold, his face flushed, his shirt half unbuttoned. "Well, hey there, Anna. Come on in. Edna's gone to visit her sister. I was just fixin' to bring your things over." He stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. Anna hesitated, a wave of unease washing over her. "Actually, I'm running late. If you could just hand me the basket." "Ah, don't be like that. Stay and chat a while. The lonely old night for a man to be alone, you know?" Harold's voice was a low drawl, his eyes roaming over her body with unsettling intensity. Her heart pounded against her ribs. Anna knew, with a sickening certainty, that Edna wasn't coming back tonight. And she knew, with a growing sense of dread, that Harold had been waiting for this moment. Harold's blood hummed with a dangerous cocktail of lust and cheap beer as he gathered Anna's laundry. Edna, thank God, was gone for a few days, off playing the doting grandmother to their youngest son's kids. He'd made sure to suggest it himself, feigning concern for her exhaustion. Now, trailer home felt too quiet, too empty, air thick with anticipation instead of Edna's constant nagging. Clutched Anna's cotton shirts to his face, inhaling the faint scent of her laundry detergent. His senses reeling. She was different from Edna. Softer, sweeter. He'd watched her over the years, the way her worn jeans hugged her curves, the graceful slope of her neck as she hung laundry, quiet strength in her eyes that both intrigued and infuriated him. Harold had always been a man who took what he wanted, consequences be damned. And what he wanted now, with a fierceness that scared even him, was Anna. He was waiting on the porch, grin predatory, when she returned a few hours later. "Thanks again, Harold. I'm sorry to bother you," Anna said, her voice tight as she reached for the laundry basket. "Now why you gotta be so formal callin' me Harold? It's Frank, darlin'. At least that's what my friends call me." He let his hand brush against hers as she took the basket, his eyes holding hers a beat too long. Anna stiffened, stepping back. "Right, well, Frank, I should get going. Ethan will be wondering where I am." She turned to go, her steps hurried. "Hold on now, Anna, no need to rush off. Stay and visit a while. Edna's gone for a few days, and it gets mighty lonely around here with just an old man and his thoughts for company." "Really can't, Frank. I have a lot to do tonight." Anna's voice was tight, her hand gripping the laundry basket so hard her knuckles had turned white. She could see the change in his eyes, the glint of something dark and hungry. "Aw, come on now, Anna. One little drink?" He chuckled, taking a step closer, closing the distance between them. "I really should be going, Frank." Anna's voice was barely a whisper now, her eyes darting to the door, wishing she hadn't given in to Harold's good old boy act. "What's the matter, Anna? Scared of a little fun?" He reached out, his hand closing around her wrist. Panic flared in Anna's chest. "Let go of me, Frank. Don't touch me. Don't you act like that with me, a pretty little thing like you stuck here all alone. Figured you might be needing a man's touch." His grip tightened, pulling her closer. "Get your hands off me, Harold. Edna will be back any minute." Harold laughed, a low, cruel sound. "Edna, Edna, Edna, that's all I ever hear. Well, Edna ain't here now, is she?" Shoved her, sending her stumbling backward. The laundry basket slipped from her grasp and clattered to the floor. Anna's mind raced. She wouldn't stand a chance if he decided to get rough. Fear, sharp and cold, pulsed through her. "Just let me go, Frank, and I won't tell anyone about this. Please." She could hear the tremor in her own voice, hating herself for the weakness she knew he would mistake for surrender. He laughed, a low, cruel sound that sent a shiver down her spine. "Who are you gonna tell, sweetheart? Who's gonna believe you? You're just a lonely widow with a sob story, and I'm—" He leaned in close, his whiskey-soaked breath hot on her cheek. "I'm a pillar of this community. Now be a good girl and do what you're told." That's when Anna saw her chance. She drove her knee upwards, connecting with his groin with a satisfying thud. Harold howled in pain, his grip loosening just enough for her to break free. She grabbed the abandoned laundry basket and sprinted towards the sanctuary of her own trailer home. "You little bitch. You ain't seen the last of me. I'll get what I want, one way or another." Harold's voice, laced with rage, followed her. Anna slammed the trailer home door shut, fumbling with the lock, her chest heaving. She slid to the floor, clutching Ethan's teddy bear to her chest, tears hot against the warm fur. Harold had been a constant, unwelcome presence in her life for years. Something about tonight felt different, dangerous. She was no longer just a struggling single mother, an object of pity. In Harold's eyes, she had become something else, something to be possessed. The days that followed were a blur of apprehension and wary avoidance for Anna. She flinched whenever she saw Harold's rusty pickup truck lumbering down the road, her hand instinctively going to the pepper spray in her pocket. She kept Ethan close, a constant shadow at her side, even bringing him into the outhouse with her, propping a chair against the door. When she saw Edna, usually hanging laundry on the line with a stoic expression, Anna would force a smile and offer a casual greeting, praying the older woman wouldn't notice the tremor in her hands or the fear that darkened her eyes. But Edna, thankfully, seemed oblivious. Or perhaps, Anna thought with a pang of sadness, Edna was simply a master at pretending, at silencing the alarm bells screaming in her own head. A week crawled by, each day an exercise in managing a fear that coiled tight in Anna's stomach. Strangely, though, Edna remained absent. Harold, however, seemed unfazed by his wife's absence, his brazenness only growing with each passing day. He would find excuses to stop Anna in the yard, his gaze lingering on her body with unsettling possessiveness. He'd even show up at her door, holding a shirt with a missing button or a torn seam, asking for her help with a pleading look in his bloodshot eyes. Anna refused his every request, her voice firm, her back straight, but each refusal seemed to fuel his determination, pushing him to bolder gestures and more frequent visits. One stiflingly hot afternoon, Anna returned home from dropping Ethan off at Aunt Susan's to find the little boy burning with fever. He was listless in her arms, his breath coming in shallow gasps, his cries weak and pitiful. Panic clawed at her throat. She had used the last of the children's Tylenol that morning. The rural clinic was a good 20-minute drive, and the old Ford pickup was out of gas. Desperation clawed at her. She had no choice. Anna scooped Ethan into her arms and raced next door, pounding on Harold's door. Harold, please, I need your help." The door creaked open, revealing Harold, his face slack with surprise. "Anna, what's all the ruckus?" "It's Ethan. He's burning up, and I don't have any medicine left. Do you have any children's Tylenol? Please, Harold, I don't know what else to do." Tears streamed down Anna's face, her voice thick with panic. Harold's eyes flickered to Ethan, then back to Anna, a calculating glint replacing the surprise in his gaze. Well, now, let me think. I believe my grandkids might have left some here last time they visited. Come on in, Anna. Let's take a look. He stepped aside, ushering her inside. Anna stepped inside Harold's trailer home, her heart pounding with a mixture of relief and apprehension. She laid Ethan down on the worn sofa, his small body dwarfed by the faded floral patterns. I don't understand it, Harold. He was fine this morning when I dropped him off at Susan's. Now look at him. He's burning up. Harold disappeared down the hallway, leaving Anna alone with her fear and the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the corner. She smoothed Ethan's hair back from his forehead, her fingers lingering against his flushed skin. Found it, Harold boomed, returning with a half-empty bottle of children's Tylenol. Here you go, Anna. Give the little guy a dose of this. He'll be right as rain in no time. Anna took the bottle gratefully, her fingers brushing against Harold's as she did. She quickly measured out the correct dosage and gently coaxed it between Ethan's parched lips. Thank you, Harold. I don't know what I would have done. Don't you worry none, sweetheart. Neighbors look out for each other, right? He settled into the armchair across from her, his gaze lingering on her with unsettling intensity. Especially when one of them is a pretty little thing like you, all alone out here. Anna shifted uncomfortably, wishing she'd never knocked on his door. She focused on Ethan, stroking his back gently, willing his fever to break. It was getting dark outside, and the air hung heavy and still. You know, Anna, Harold said, his voice low and smooth, it's a shame a woman like you has to struggle so hard. A man could make things easier for you, take care of you and that boy. You just let him. Anna's breath caught in her throat. She met his gaze, her own hardening. I'm doing just fine on my own, Harold, and I don't need your charity. He chuckled, leaning back in his chair, his eyes roaming over her body with an arrogance that made her skin crawl. Stubborn, are you? I like that in a woman, makes him more interesting to tame. Anna felt a surge of anger. You disgusting Harold. Just stay away from me and my son, do you hear me? He only laughed again, the sound echoing in the small, airless trailer home. It was then that Anna realized her mistake. She should have risked the drive to the clinic, should have risked anything but being alone with Harold. She scooped a still feverish Ethan into her arms and stood up. I'm leaving now, Harold, and don't you ever touch me again. She pushed past him, her heart hammering against her ribs, and didn't slow down until she reached the flimsy safety of her own trailer home. Harold watched Anna's retreating figure, a slow, predatory grin spreading across his face. He imagined her running, her breath catching in her throat, her heart hammering against her ribs. The thought of her fear excited him, fueled the dark obsession that had taken root in his mind. He would have her. Decided, one way or another, Anna would be his. That night, Harold lay awake, his mind replaying the scene in his trailer home. Anna's fear, her struggle, her undeniable beauty. He'd always had a reputation for being a ladies' man, his eyes always wandering, always searching for a glimpse of something hidden beneath the surface. He hadn't paid much attention to Anna at first, not until after Mark had died. It was the day he'd caught her nursing Ethan on her porch, her shirt pulled up, revealing a flash of soft, creamy skin. From that moment on, Harold was hooked. He'd watched her, day after day, her every move fueling the fire in his gut. He even went so far as to carve a small peephole in the wall of his bedroom, angling it towards the makeshift outhouse Anna used for bathing. He hadn't been able to see everything, but the glimpses of her, the flash of pale skin, the curve of her hip as she reached for a towel, were enough to drive him wild with lust. That morning, Edna had called, her voice tight with resentment. She'd be back in a couple of days, she said. Her sister needed her. Harold had feigned disappointment, but inside he'd felt a surge of triumph. 2 days. 2 days to make Anna his. He paced the trailer home, restless, his mind racing with possibilities. As dusk settled over the small town, he caught sight of Anna, walking back from Aunt Susan's, Ethan's small hand tucked in hers. She was alone. Harold watched her approach, his heart pounding with anticipation. She was walking quickly, her head down, clearly trying to avoid him. Just as she was about to pass his trailer, Harold saw her stop, She was heading towards the outhouse, a small pile of laundry tucked under her arm. Desire, raw and urgent, surged through him. He tossed his half-eaten dinner onto the table, his appetite replaced by a hunger of a different kind. He slipped out the back door, his heart hammering against his ribs, and crouched behind the overgrown bushes that separated their properties. He watched as Anna disappeared inside the outhouse, his eyes glued to the narrow gap between the flimsy wooden planks. He could hear the sound of water splashing, the rustle of clothes, and then he saw her. Anna was standing beneath the makeshift showerhead, her back to him, clothes discarded on the floor. The water cascaded over her bare skin, her long, dark hair plastered to her shoulders. She was more beautiful than he'd ever imagined. Harold's breath caught in his throat, his hand instinctively reaching for the bulge in his pants. Couldn't tear his eyes away, his mind consumed by a single primal urge. He had to have her. A low, guttural groan escaped his lips. Anna froze, her head snapping up, her eyes wide with alarm. "Who's there?" she whispered, voice trembling. The sound of his own ragged breathing was the only answer. Harold grinned, his eyes glinting with a dangerous light. He shoved the outhouse door open, his heart pounding with a mixture of lust and triumph. Anna came to, lying on the cold, hard floor of the outhouse, her body a canvas of pain. She pushed herself up, every muscle screaming in protest, and stumbled towards the cracked mirror above the sink. Her reflection stared back at her. Hair tangled, one cheek already swelling from Harold's slap, eyes vacant and hollow. She turned on the water, the cold spray a shock against her skin. She filled a bucket, dunking her head under the icy surface, holding it there until her lungs burned and her vision blurred. She scrubbed at her skin, as if she could wash away the filth, the shame, the memory of his touch. But the water, no matter how cold, no matter how hard she scrubbed, couldn't erase the violation that had stained her soul. She sobbed, the tears coming in wrenching gasps, the sound echoing in the small enclosed space. She thought of Mark, his gentle touch, his loving eyes. She thought of Ethan, his innocent smile, his laughter. Why? Why had this happened to her? Why had she been left alone to face this world, this darkness? She wanted to die, to disappear, to erase the memory of this night, of Harold's hands on her body, his breath on her skin. Anna dressed slowly, her movements mechanical, her face a mask of despair. She stepped out of the outhouse, her legs shaking, her body trembling with a cold rage that threatened to consume her. Harold was lying on her bed, his eyes closed, a smug smile playing on his lips. He was reliving his conquest, his mind replaying the scene, feel of her skin beneath his hands. He hadn't even noticed her enter the trailer home, his senses still clouded with lust and self-satisfaction. Anna felt a surge of fury, primal need for revenge that eclipsed her fear. She grabbed the heavy glass vase from the table beside the bed and brought it down on Harold's head with a sickening crunch. The vase shattered, spraying shards of glass across the room. Harold screamed, a high-pitched, gurgling sound that cut off abruptly. He clutched his head, blood seeping between his fingers, staining the sheets crimson. Anna watched him, her face impassive, her eyes cold and empty. She felt no remorse, no pity, only a fierce satisfaction that he was finally paying for what he had done. She turned and walked away, leaving Harold to bleed on her bed, his moans fading into the silence. She stumbled back to her own trailer home, collapsing in front of a framed photo of Mark, her tears finally flowing freely. "Why, Mark? Why did you leave me? Why couldn't you stay and protect us?" she whispered, her voice choked with grief and despair. The thought of ending it all, of joining Mark in the peaceful embrace of death, was a seductive whisper in her mind. How could she face tomorrow, face the whispers, the knowing looks, the shame that now clung to her like a second skin? But then, through the fog of despair, she heard Ethan's cries coming from Aunt Susan's trailer home next door. He'd been left there, forgotten in the chaos of the night. Anna's head snapped up, a wave of panic washing over her. She'd forgotten about Ethan. She'd been so consumed by her own pain, her own self-loathing, that she'd completely forgotten about her son. She scrambled to her feet, wiping the tears from her cheeks. She had to get to Ethan. She had to make sure he was safe. She burst out of the trailer home, running towards Aunt Susan's, her heart pounding in her chest. As she reached the porch, the door swung open, revealing Aunt Susan, her face etched with concern. Anna, honey, what's wrong? Ethan's been asking for you. I figured you must have fallen asleep. Anna swept Ethan into her arms, burying her face in his hair, inhaling his sweet, familiar scent. Clung to her, his small body trembling. Aunt Susan's eyes widened as she took in Anna's appearance, her torn clothes, the bruises on her face, the wild look in her eyes. Anna, what happened? Did someone hurt you? Anna shook her head, too ashamed, too broken to speak. Honey, you can tell me. What's wrong? Did that Harold? Aunt Susan's voice trailed off, her eyes filled with a knowing dread. Anna's carefully constructed facade crumbled. She collapsed onto the porch steps, Ethan still clutched tightly in her arms, and sobbed, the tears coming in wrenching gasps. Aunt Susan knelt beside her, her arm around Anna's shoulders, her voice soft and soothing. It's okay, honey. You're safe now. Just tell me what happened. And so Anna told her everything. She told her about Harold's attack, about the fear, the pain, the shame. She told her about the vase, about the blood, about her desperate wish to disappear. When she finished, Aunt Susan held her close, her anger palpable. That bastard. I'm going to kill him. He'll pay for what he's done to you. Anna shook her head, exhaustion washing over her. I don't know if he's alive. I had to get away. I had to get to Ethan. Don't you worry about Harold. We'll deal with him later. Right now, you need to take care of yourself. Take care of Ethan. You're safe here with me. No one will hurt you again. Promise. Before Anna could protest, Aunt Susan was out the door, marching towards Harold's trailer home, a righteous fury blazing in her eyes. Anna watched her go, a mixture of fear and relief flooding her. What if Harold hurt Aunt Susan? What if he denied everything? What if no one believed her? A few minutes later, Aunt Susan returned, face grim. Well, he's alive, but he won't be bothering you anymore. I can promise you that. He's got a nice little bandage on his head where I introduced him to my cast iron skillet. Anna stared at her, stunned. You hit him? Damn straight I did, and I told him if he ever came near you or Ethan again, I'd finish the job. I also told him I was going to the sheriff first thing tomorrow morning to report his attack on you. He tried to deny it, of course, said you were making it all up. But I saw the look in his eyes, the same look I've seen in too many men over the years. He's a liar and a coward, and he'll get what's coming to him. Anna didn't know what to say. She was grateful for Aunt Susan's fierce protectiveness, but she was also terrified of what might happen next. Would Harold retaliate? Would anyone believe her story? The next morning, Anna packed a few belongings and, with Ethan clinging to her leg, moved into Aunt Susan's spare bedroom. She felt numb, detached from everything, the events of the previous night, a hazy nightmare that she couldn't quite shake. The days turned into weeks, then months. Anna found a job at a textile factory in the next town, the repetitive work providing a welcome distraction from her thoughts. She sent Ethan to a new daycare, one where she wouldn't have to worry about running into Harold or his venomous gaze. She tried to move on, to rebuild her life, but the memory of that night in the outhouse continued to haunt her dreams. One afternoon, almost a year later, Anna ran into Edna at the grocery store. The older woman looked frail, her face etched with grief and weariness. She approached Anna hesitantly, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and regret. Anna, I need to talk to you. About Harold. He's gone. Had a stroke a few weeks back, died in his sleep. Anna was surprised by the lack of emotion she felt. No anger, no relief, just a profound sadness for the life that had been wasted, for the pain that had been inflicted. I'm sorry, Edna. I truly am. Edna nodded, tears welling up in her eyes.